So in this 20 minutes, what I'm going to do is offer you a moment to just pause and think about all these incredible terms and concepts that we've been hearing about, both today, as well as if you were in the adolescent meeting yesterday and the healthcare meeting, and throughout the whole idea of this conference week of compassion. So what have we heard about? We've heard the word compassion, and we've heard a definition of it just now. We've heard the term kindness, and we've seen that it overlaps in many ways with an extended definition of compassion. If we say that compassion isn't just helping people who are suffering, but actually helping people flourish, then it actually meets the criteria for how we might define kindness. And we've heard words like care, altruism, and love. And then there's this word empathy, which we've also heard. In fact, it's the name of this conference, Empathy and Compassion in Society. So what do these terms have in common? What I'm going to do is start with an experiential exercise to allow you to feel a certain inner set of experiences. And then what we're going to do is explore what the fundamental process might be that ties all of those concepts together, and how they might relate to yet another concept, which is the concept of well-being. So if you want to put your things down, what I'm going to do is just say a word and repeat it several times, and then I'll pause. I'll repeat another word several times, then pause, and then offer you some other suggestions, and then we'll explore what that was like. So for this exercise, all I'm inviting you to do is just let into awareness whatever arises as we go through this experience. Okay? So here we go. No. 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 Yes. 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 Now try putting one hand on your chest and one hand on your abdomen, and just put some gentle pressure. Take some nice deep breaths. And now switch it out so the hand on your chest goes to your abdomen, the one on your abdomen goes to your chest. Nice deep breaths. And now put it whichever way feels most comforting for you. That's great. Now I invite you to take a deeper and more intentional breath. And then we'll just let this brief exercise come to a close, and you can leave your hands there if you like to. Let's just do a quick survey. How many of you felt it was comforting to actually put a hand on your chest and a hand on your abdomen? Raise your hands really high. Okay, so the majority of people. And how many of you who found it comforting found that the right hand on top was the most comforting? And how many were left hand on top people? It's amazing. Okay, good. I've done this now with almost 18,000 people, and it's always the same. A quarter are lefties, 3/4 righties. Most people find it comforting. Someone can get a PhD figuring out why. No one knows why. But the point is, it can actually bring comfort to you. And one subject that was studied, myself, we have some insights into what that does when it's comforting. Let's just go through what the no and yes felt like. When you heard the word no, just throw out some words. What did it feel out? Throw it out and I'll repeat it. Jarring. Painful. Constricting. Isolating. Stabbing. in the stomach. What was that over here? Stressful, okay? So just remember those adjectives that we're talking about, how it felt. And then what did yes feel like? Soothing, positive, safe, smiling. What's that? Open. Warm. Okay. What's that? Welcoming. Okay. Peaceful. Very good. So the first take-home message from this very brief talk about something called interpersonal neurobiology, the interpersonal of that phrase is the idea that something happens between us that's very much related to what happens within us. That's the neurobiology part. And interpersonal neurobiology is a field that helps explore things like this exercise in ways we'll talk about in a few moments. But the first take-home message here is that human beings, in fact, as we heard from the presentations just before, especially Dr. Gilbert's slides of the brain, we have two fundamental states we can enter that we need to start our discussion with about compassion and empathy and kindness and all that. One is the state of being reactive, which is the no state. And reactivity is very different from the receptive state of yes. So just from an experiential point of view, what you felt inside was the difference between being reactive versus receptive. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that every one of those terms, altruism, empathy, kindness, compassion, love, caring, connection, all those have to do with a receptive state that we'll get into in a few moments. The reactive state actually has a historical value to it. It happens when we're threatened. And when we're threatened, we can enter into this reactive state, which usually has one or a combination of 4 Fs. We fight back, we flee, we tighten up our muscles and freeze, waiting to see what we'll do in response to threat, or the 4th F, we faint, which is also called feigning death. We collapse when we feel totally helpless. Reactive states are interesting in many, many ways because the whole field of positive psychology, which explores a term which is often uncomfortable, not just for professionals, but even for the lay public, positive emotions and negative emotions. They use those terms, which make me always feel uncomfortable. But the term means basically if you have a negative emotion like anger, fear, sadness, anxiety, despair, all these states you can get into, they're usually in response, or actually they would say always in response to threat. So the no reactive state actually is the gateway to these what sometimes are called destructive emotions. If they persist for long periods of time, they're not producing health. So all emotions are fair game. If you feel them, they should be expressed and explored. But these negative states are based on threat, and our whole system becomes unhealthy. So when we heard the mayors talk in that absolutely magnificent way about how to create cities that promote flourishing and thriving, we want to ask the question, what does that really mean? And these negative states, these reactive no states, are the gateway to not thriving and not flourishing. In contrast, receptive states have that different quality that you felt, and they are the gateway to positive emotions like love, like joy, like elation, like awe, gratitude. All those emotional states, if you can attain them and maintain them, they actually produce well-being. It's fascinating. And that's that field. Now, what do these emotions really mean? What does it mean to have an emotion? What does it mean if we say, well, compassion is literally calm is with and passion feeling? It's feeling with another person. One interpretation, a common interpretation is, I feel your pain, and I'm able to hold that pain inside of me enough to think about how I'm going to skillfully take an action to reduce your suffering. And that's one pretty straightforward definition of compassion that's magnificent. We saw that Mayor Fisher said we're going to widen the definition of compassion, not to just be the standard one, but to say what usually people define kindness as, that in fact it's not just reducing suffering, but let's produce flourishing. And many people don't use compassion that way. I think it's just is a matter of just vocabulary, so that isn't the issue. We want to make sure whenever we use a word, we're saying what it is. Either way, what does it really mean to be open to another person's feelings, and that's called empathy, and then to take action to reduce suffering, that's called compassion, and even I want to feel your feelings and then do something to help you flourish, and that would be usually called kindness. There's another emotion we should talk about, which is called empathic joy, which is I am in such a state of openness. When you're doing well, I'm doing well, and that's great. Your success is my success, and that we're going to get into in just a few moments. So what do these all have in common? What do reactive states and receptive states tell us about creating a compassionate inner life for inner transformation, interpersonal life, and even our life, not just with other people, but all living beings, and in fact, the planet Earth. So what can we say about that? Well, the field I work in is called interpersonal neurobiology. What it is it's an attempt to combine all the different disciplines of science, math, physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, sociology, linguistics, and anthropology, all into one field. So that's what we do. And in interpersonal neurobiology, we have 40 textbooks for professionals that I've overseen the publication of through Norton. So there's a whole professional library. We want to basically translate the hard-earned findings of empirical research to bring it to life, to improve life on this planet. So we're not just interested in science and the consilient or universal findings across these disciplines. We're interested in translating the science for benefiting life in all its forms. So that's what we do in interpersonal neurobiology. And we ask questions like, what is the mind? And what do we do to create a healthy mind? So in this conference, the focus is on compassion and empathy. And I want you to take a deep breath, because we're about to go on a little wild journey. And if you have safety belts in your chairs, you might want to put them on, because it's going to be wild. And when people who aren't familiar with this hear it at first time, they go, that is really weird. So I want to beg your forgiveness for the weirdness of it. But I want to start with a fundamental question. Why is it that essentially no field that explores mental life has a definition of the mind? And if I hadn't asked over 100,000 mental health professionals in rooms like this, or school individuals, educators, about 20,000 in rooms like this, or even chair people of all the different departments of all those different disciplines I mentioned, there is no definition of the mind. It's fascinating. There are descriptions, but no definitions. So what I'm going to do, because of the shortness of time, in fact, I'm going to ask my timekeeper how much time I have. 7 minutes, beautiful. That we are going to explore a definition of mind. We're going to look at the notion of self. We're going to look at compassion, altruism, empathy, kindness through this lens. And then we're going to propose what holds them all together and connects to receptive states versus reactive states. You ready? Ready. Here we go. So very simply, when you look across all these disciplines and you ask, what is our mental life really about? It's about the flow, which means the change across time of energy and information patterns. The flow of energy and information. Now, this is a very scientific concept, meaning it comes in the form of photons coming from me to you, with these light bouncing off my body. It comes from the form of air molecules moving when you hear sound. In your brain, it comes as electrochemical energy transformations, with ions flowing in and out. So this is not a loosey-goosey term, energy. It's specific. It's an aspect of physics. Information from information sciences is always riding on energy patterns. So certain energy doesn't have information, but other energy, like if I say compassion, that has certain meanings, different ones for different people in the room, but it has a meaning. So an energy pattern with symbolic meaning is called information, but not all information, not all energy has information, it has features. So that's number one, energy and information flow. Where is this flow happening for mental life? Well, strangely enough, it doesn't just happen in your brain, as some neuroscientists would have you imagine, although I don't even talk in those terms. It happens throughout your whole body. And so when you experience the receptive and reactive state, you weren't saying, oh my gosh, in my amygdala, I'm having a little tightening there. No, you felt it in your whole body, didn't you? And even when we did this move with your hands, it's a bodily thing. So the first thing to say, it's not just enskulled, it's fully embodied. That's number one. But notice what happened between me and you. What happened? Energy and information flow is happening between me and you. This flow isn't just within, it's between. And this allows us to embrace the powerful findings of anthropology, studying how energy and information patterns are embedded in culture, as well as what happens inside, let's say, the head, for a neuroscientist who's studying the brain. Energy and information flow is the commonality even between math and physics and linguistics and anthropology. So what's the mind? In our view, the mind is a self-organizing emergent property of the complex system, which is energy and information flow that's happening within and between. And there's a long line of discussion about that, but the bottom line of this is self-organizing processes tend to move toward harmony if they're given freedom to unfold. But as you heard from the last two presentations, certain blockages happen to that. And from an interpersonal neurobiology point of view, the way we'd interpret the two presentations you just heard is like this. That optimal self-organization, this comes straight out of math, requires that you differentiate elements of energy and information flow, and then you take those differentiated elements and you link them together. And the name for that is the second take-home message for today. The name of linking of differentiated parts is called integration. And in our view, through a long line of reasoning you can read in The Developing Mind or in the book Mindsight, or for adolescents, the book Brainstorm, our view is that a healthy mind is a mind that promotes integration within and between. So what does that mean? What that means is that I honor you and am really interested in what's going on inside of you, not just your behavior, but your mental experience, your inner subjective experience. I honor that as being different from what's going on in this body. So that's the differentiation. Compassionate action, kind action, empathic action are all integrative acts. They're integrative states. And integration is what's actually created in a state of receptivity. Integration is reduced in reactivity. The negative emotional states of fear and sadness and anger are actually lowered states of integration, because in our view, an emotion is a shift in integration. And positive emotions, in contrast, that come from the receptive state are actually enhancing states of integration and therefore promoting well-being, because in our view, well-being comes from integration. Well-being comes from integration. Now, the last thing I'll say, because I have 1 minute left, is that the self has been falsely characterized as being embedded in your body. Parents unintentionally teach this to children, schools reinforce it, culture reinforces it, and the self being in your body is not only wrong, it is a destructive belief. The self is not just these nodes we live in. The system that we have are these nodes and their interconnections. It's the within and the between. We have confused the node for the self instead of the whole system being the self. And a truly compassionate city, truly compassionate state, a truly compassionate country, a truly compassionate world is where we actually take the definition of self and put it where it really needs to be, not a singular noun, but a plural verb. And the way, for the adolescents who are here, who heard me say this yesterday, and I say this in the Brainstorm book, instead of just being a me, or even saying, okay, well, there's a me and there's also a we, and that's okay, we need to combine those two. We have an internal self of a me, and we do have an interconnected self of a we. Both are important. And together, they make a MWE, M-W-E. So a truly integrated self-experience that gives rise to compassion, gives rise to kindness, gives rise to empathy and altruism, gives rise to love and caring, is when we allow this self to enter this receptive state, supporting people who are in reactivity and negative emotions to move to receptivity, but even going beyond that, to not just the me and being with people like me, but having ways of producing not just close compassion, but extended compassion, sometimes called universal compassion. That will be a requirement if we're going to move this world to a more compassionate place. And together, we can create that kind of integrated world. Thank you very much.